Okay, continuing with the U-Class rebuild, I'm sort of now onto the lining stage of the build, so getting quite near the finish now. On this Loco I'm using, or I used to use HMRS white lining Pressfix transfers, where you'd have to paint the black line around the outside or the inside or between the lines, so you have to lay down a black base first with using paint or whatever, and then laying the white lining over the top of it to get the white black white effect, or white black around the edges. I've now sort of for this one changed the method, so I'm now using LNER Pressfix transfers from HMRS, and as you can see on the Loco above and on the smoke deflector on the right, I've already started lining the Loco out. It's a lot easier using these transfers because you already have the white, black, white arrangement to do the sort of edges around the cab, which you can just about see, and also on the smoke deflectors. I simply cut the lines, which you can see in the shot there, in half, so you get white black or black white when you cut it in half. These are normally used for boiler bands, which I have used on this Loco as well, because it's white, black, white, so it's the normal sort of southern livery. As I mentioned, I've actually cut some in half. You can see the tender above here, which again I've used these transfers for, and if I just zoom in slightly you can see what I mean. You've got the black around the outside and the white on the inside. This was just done by cutting the line of the transfer, which you can just see here. You can see I've got half of it above the thick line there. So basically I've put a line through the middle, and then measured it up using the ruler, and then cut it using the sort of craft knife, and I just sort of flick the edge up and peel it off with a pair of tweezers. With HMRS, the transfers itself, as I mentioned, they're Pressfix, so they have a sort of sticky back to them. So they work in a similar way to water slides, but in a slightly different way. They actually stay in position. They don't slide off the actual off the body. You can see I've done the cylinders, I've done the boiler barrel there, and I've just started lining out the cab on this side. The other side is actually complete. I still need to do the running plate and the steps on both ends. I've also done the smoke deflector, as you can see, and it will look similar and hopefully the same to the tender. So I'll just sort of talk you through how I go about this, because I got a question on one of the forums how to do the curved lines. Obviously this transfer sheet does come with curved lines, mainly for the splashers and LNER running plates. Problem is they don't really match the southern ones too well, so what I'm forced to do is use a bit of the straight piece and try and bend it around certain areas of the Loco, and the cab is probably one of the places, as well as the running plate and the steps, where I'll probably use it. So I'll try and explain to you how I do this process and what bits I use where. Okay, you can see the bit of lining which I've positioned just there. I've pressed it into position at the top edge here, and I have now dampened the backing paper, which should just peel off when it has soaked up all the water. Right, that is now off. I'll zoom in a little bit, so just to get away from the shadow a little bit. So basically we've got this top edge here, which is in position, and the best way to keep these transfers from breaking is keeping them quite wet and quite damp. So you sort of try and hold the end piece whilst trying to bend the straight part into a nice slight curve down to the bottom edge, which is there. Again, you have to be careful. You may need to cut the transfer to create the bend, because this transfer is made up into two bits. So you've got the black and the white, so it's a bit harder to bend into shape, unlike the single lining transfers, which you can get from HMRS anyway. Okay, after a little bit of time, I think it took about 3 or 4 minutes, the transfer is now in place. I basically cut it to length where I needed it, and just sort of kept the transfer damp with the paintbrush. Not too much water, just a little bit of water. Held it in place, pressed the end on the top so it stuck and stayed in position. And then I gently nudged the curve in with a blunt knife, which won't damage or cut the transfer. To actually hold it or fix it to the body, I use a cotton wool bud, which is damp, because if you use your finger, the transfer will attach to your finger, and then you'll pull most of what you've done off of the body. So using a cotton bud, which is slightly damp, to hold it in place and fix it into place helps a great deal. So you can see the top edge is pretty much done. The cub cutout there, there's a slight, there's quite a close match on the LNER sheet, which I will show you next. Okay, going around the cab cutout, I'm starting to use, I used on the other side, so one of these. Basically what I've done is I've cut the shape in half, so they're not actually long enough to go round the cutout. So I've cut it in half to lengthen the transfer, and then I'll fill it in with a bit of straight piece to bridge the gap. I think the curves on here weren't quite big enough, so I had to sort of tweak them a little bit by putting a cut in the middle and stretching it out a little bit and easing it around the bend. I'll put it on the Loco and I'll show you what I mean. Okay, as you can see, the lining is in place around the cab cutout. You may or may not be able to see I have cut the lining around the curve there in 2 places, so I can ease the curve of the of the transfer to get it round. As you can see, I've still got a small gap there and a small gap underneath to fill in with some straight lining. I'll probably use the same sort of transfer to do the curve just down on the edge of the just close to the running plate. This will probably be done a little bit later on, but you can see there it's coming along well. I'll be also getting an etched plate for the cab side there, which will come from Narrow Planet, which are very kindly doing this for me at a really good cost. So I recommend, if you're struggling for a cab side plate, especially a southern one, drop them an email and drop them a picture as well, which usually helps. And you should find that the prices are quite reasonable. Alright, after the last part you saw, which was the lining, I've actually managed to finish off the rest of it as well. So on both sides of the cab, And also the running plate, as you can see here, the running plate was done exactly the same way as the cab was done, to get all the curves around the running plate, etc. You can see I put the handrail wire in as well. I fitted the smoke deflectors. I've also varnished the whole body as well, and also given the smoke box and cab roof a lick of matte black paint to give it a slightly less shiny finish. And also the real Locos, if you look at them, they're pretty much matte black and painted directly onto the metal anyway, so that's why. And also if you got a complete satin black Loco, it's just all one plain black colour, so it's nice to split it up a little bit and use some matte black to pick out the certain areas of the Loco, like sometimes the running plate and the smoke box and the cab roof. But as you can see, it's all varnished and also all the lining is applied. The safety valves and whistle are on. The whistle's actually a turned down version of what they used to fit to Hornby Locos. I've literally put this in a drill and filed it around to try and shorten it down a little bit, and also to curve over the top so it looks like a southern whistle. Apart from that, buffers have been fitted. Oops, just turn it over. Yeah, you can see I've put the number on the buffer beam as well. They look a little big, the numbers on this, but sadly it's the only size ones which came on the sheet of paper. The transfer sheet, I should say, which came from HMRS, Southern and Wansell livery for coaches and Locos. You can see that's pretty much done on one side. Turn it round, and you can see it's complete on the other side as well. It's got a satin varnish, acrylic varnish on the body, and as I mentioned before, the smoke box was painted after the varnish was applied. The tender has also had another coat of varnish, so that matches the Loco. The Loco chassis has still been being tweaked a little bit. You can see the cylinders have been varnished, and also I've painted in between the frames. You can see at the front there, which you can just see between the running plate and the space between the boiler and the running plate, I should say. You can see the back of the motor shimmed with a bit of plastic card to try and stop it locking up a little bit. Take that plastic card out and it won't turn at all. I'm still having a few little gremlins here and there with the chassis, but hopefully I'll be able to suss out what's wrong, or maybe it's just it hasn't run for a long time and it needs a bit of a run in. But you can see it's connected to the tender, so all pickups are working. Also on the tender as well, I forgot the sprung buffers have been fitted as well. The wheels have been tidied up a little bit. They've received the paint again, and the actual Loco chassis actually does work. As you can see there, works quite nicely in forward. Reverse, for some reason, it's a bit tight, but it seems to be okay now again for some reason. It seems to keep coming and going, the tightness, but it seems to be okay now. But anyway, that's pretty much the chassis complete. And then the body will go back on again and checked. I'm still waiting for cab side plates. You can also see in the Loco, I've also started fitting some cab fittings. You can see the reverser there, the red handle, and also the back plate, which needs to be stuck in after I put the windows in. But other than that, it's pretty much complete and finished, and hopefully give it a run when it's all in one piece and looking like it's due to go on the layout.